Hey guys, Mary here. I just got a message or post on from the Continuum group, which is the group where we practice together a lot and we know one another well and we go deep. And one of the members of that group posted this. She said, "Today I'm noticing the perception within myself of inappropriateness, a projection of that perception by others, the feeling that others perceive inappropriateness in me. I'm sitting with that discomfort right now." So that was the first thing she put. So I would like to point out something about this. She's noticing a perception within herself of the feeling that others perceive inappropriateness in me, right? So would like you to take a moment and just sense into the sophistication of that observation. She's not saying other people are judging me. She's not saying other people perceive me as inappropriate. She's not even saying I think they do, or I shouldn't think they do, or any of that. She is noticing within herself a feeling that others are perceiving. So it's almost like a fear thing or something like that. And she's sitting with the discomfort. So this is that sort of self-awareness that leads to deep understanding. And then she wrote this a little later. My brain wants to say how later, but it doesn't matter. During/after my chiropractic appointment today, I finally pinpointed the emotion that made me so uncomfortable. Shame. It's shame. Massive, blazing gobs of shame. Heaps. And then she tagged me because that's what we do in there. And I responded to her thing. And then I said, hey, I'm going to make a video about this because I want to talk about it more completely than I can put in a typed comment. And then I thought I'll share this more widely because this is really important. Okay. So this person has done a lot of deep work. Very good at developing the skill of noticing what's going on internally, which is essential to empowerment, right? As long as we're constantly focusing on what people are doing out there, we're not actually dealing with our own reactivity to it, which is where the power lies. There's that wonderful Viktor Frankl quote, between a stimulus and response, there's a gap, and in that gap lies our power, something like that. It's not actually a quote by him, but whatever. This summary of his work that someone wrote. So between stimulus and response, between what happens out there and what happens in here and our response, there's a gap. And that gap is where our power lies, our power of interpretation, our power of choosing, our power of self-soothing, our power of redirecting, our power. And our practice expands that power. So we begin to be more in charge of ourselves rather than reacting in old conditioned patterns, which came from other people, came from other experiences, which came from things that were outside of our control. So we're moving the locus of control more within our own self and choosing. So this wonderful person has been doing a lot of this. Really good. Okay, now I replied that this was such an important discovery. And I mentioned that there's a moment when those of us, and I say us because I am one of these people, who have experienced incredibly shaming childhood experiences and maybe have some version of CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or trauma, we can just call it that, from childhood shaming, neglect, etc. There's this moment when we realize the degree of shame that we are experiencing. And before that moment, it's all covered up with thoughts like, oh, people shouldn't be that way, or I shouldn't be this way, or why am I so bad, or what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with other people. And what's happening is this feeling of shame is triggering all these thoughts. So we're caught up in the thoughts. So we aren't actually aware of the feeling of shame. But there comes this moment in our healing when we go, whoa, shame. We see how ubiquitous it is in our experience. And that moment is a really, really important moment in our lives because it is simultaneously kind of excruciating. You can kind of hear how this person described it. She was like, it's shame, massive blazing gobs of shame, right? You can hear the intensity of her experience of it. So it's both excruciating, but it is also a huge step toward freedom. Because, like every other nervous system activation, shame is a response that comes within us. And because neurons that fire together wire together, things that tend to have generated shame in the past will generate it in the present. That's just sort of how we work. And so shame can get triggered very quickly if we've had a lot of shaming experiences of childhood. And shaming experiences in our childhood can be pretty minor and trigger a very strong reaction, because we're talking about little beings that we were, these little confused, sweet beings that we were. So when we have a nervous system response like that, like, and we're not aware of it, it very quickly generates thoughts. A feeling will generate thoughts. And the thoughts are almost like a defensive reaction, which probably was quite necessary at some point. And the thoughts will come fast, and then the thoughts will reactivate the shame, intensify the shame, generate new feelings, and it just creates this loop of momentum that snowballs. And so for many of us, when we have strong habits of self-deprecation, or strong habits of blaming others, or strong habits of feeling overwhelmed, there's this internal loop that we're not really noticing, but is driving all of these thoughts of like, God, I suck, or people suck, or the world sucks, or why am I like this, etc. So when you have a moment when you go, whoa, look at that shame, it is a doorway into that can be enormously powerful. Now, the thing about shame as a feeling is it is one of the more powerful and overwhelming feelings that we experience. And so you're not going to be able to sit with it unless you have a pretty firm foundation to sit on, sort of like sitting on one of those ball chairs or something. If you don't have, a ball as a chair, if you don't have your feet on the floor, you're not going to be able to have your stability. So the feet on the floor is both a metaphor and a reality, that when we place our feet on the floor, and please feel free to try it as you're listening to this, when we place our feet on the floor and we feel into that contact between the sole of our feet and what it is resting on. It could be your sock, or it could be your shoe, or it could be the floor. I have my feet in socks on a heating pad, which I love. It's cold here, as you might guess. You feel that contact. It's bringing awareness down from all the activity, all the intensity, into what for most people is a pretty stable place. Not a lot going on down there, not a lot of change happening. Everybody's unique. If this doesn't work for you, that's okay. You might not have feet. I might be talking to someone without feet. In which case, any part of you that is an actual contact with what is supporting you, the chair, the ground, the bed, that is a point of the bottom gravity. Perhaps you can rest there. But in my experience, the lower on the body, the better. That we pull ourselves, perhaps because so much of our intense awareness is up here in our shoulders, in our jaw, in our heart, that this pulls us into a more complete sense of ourselves as a body. So we're really just placing awareness. And when I say placing awareness, I mean just feeling what you feel. And you might think about what you're feeling. You might say, oh, I noticed that my right pinky toe is feeling less weight than my right big toe, or vice versa. Or you might notice how the arch of your foot doesn't feel anything possibly, or feels less. So you might think about it, but you might also just rest in that for a moment. And what that does, it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system to help bring us back into regulation. When you have done sufficient work like that, then it is possible that you might be able to sit with a feeling like shame and allow it to pass through, allow it to subside, allow it to naturally subside, is really what feelings will do if they're not reactivated by thoughts. But often the first time we do something like this, the being present to it actually allows it to be felt more. Feelings work like a wave moving through the nervous system. And you know how a wave works, it sort of increases and it peaks and then it diminishes. And you could have a wave that goes up really fast and then slowly diminishes, right? Many feelings do that. But you could have a wave that's sort of smaller, doesn't last very long. But this wave pattern is important because if it's a wave and you've been holding it down because you can't handle feeling it, which is a perfectly reasonable response to many, many feelings, when you let it go, it's actually going to increase before it diminishes. But it's still a wave. It will still pass. So the feet on the floor is a very important point of focus to navigate difficult feelings, and in particular shame. In particular shame. And what I will tell you is this. If you have a lot of conditioning to feel shame in your childhood, which many of us do, many of us do, then shame is attached to a lot of things. Remember, neurons that fire together wire together. So this triggers shame, this triggers shame. I have a lot of these triggers. But when a feeling arises, if you have been able to come back to the present moment over and over again and soothe your nervous system, which is the work we're doing, by the way, in Building Your Bliss. I hope that you will join us. And the Continuum group is a place where we can do deeper work. You're also welcome to come and join us in there. If you can do the work of that over and over again, what will happen is this neurons that fire together, wire together, this reaction will happen in a space in which it can pass through without causing a lot of upheaval. On shame, this is a really big ask, okay? It's a really big ask. Nonetheless, we do the work until little by little we can be more and more present with what arises in us. We can say, oh, there it is. Okay, got it. If you don't know my work, okay, got it. I call them the 3 magic words, and the people who practice them are astonished by how powerful they are. And we're doing that in Building Your Bliss too. That would be one of the foundations. So, okay, got it. This is happening. Nervous system diminishes, and in the space beyond, there is a kind of clarity. There's a kind of clarity that allows for new choosing, fresh new moment, fresh new choice. So, these are not necessarily easy things. Imagine I'm talking about playing volleyball. And I'm saying when the ball comes over the net, all you got to do is you get underneath it with your fingers like this and you set it. But if you've ever played volleyball, it's like, okay, and there's a whole lot of things that you're going to have to practice before you'll be able to do that. But nonetheless, once you get good at those things, you can set a ball. I played volleyball, in case you can't tell. Whatever is the thing you know about, whether it's playing the piano or playing volleyball, driving a car, right? You're driving a car. I used to drive in New York City all the time. That's a lot of stimulation. I drove in Morocco. That was wild. And the only reason I could drive with all that stimulation is because my body completely knew how to drive the car without me. That took time. I remember when I was learning to drive a stick shift, panicking when I had to slow down because I didn't know how to change gears slowing down, panicking when I had to change lanes. Okay, so these are learned things we learn over time. And as we get better at these fundamental skills, navigating the world becomes much easier. So shame is a big one of these. And I'll be posting this in the Continuum group, and we'll get feedback in there and we'll have a conversation about it. So the person who posted this will be able to explore this further. And we do live calls in there too, so we can explore it live if that's helpful later. And for anyone else who's just seeing this for the first time, I just invite you to know that there are ways that you can make navigating the world much easier because you have increased your skills of navigation. You've increased your balance, you've increased your steering skills, you've increased your knowledge of how things work. All right, so anyway, I hope you found that helpful. Post any questions. If you tag me, I'll be more likely to see them, but probably I'll see them anyway since it's my post. Okay.